Okay, so hi everyone. So we're gonna get started. So hi to people in physical world and also on Zoom. So I am Cindy Simukal, the assistant professor and director of the Hybrid Body Lab. And we're really just honored today to host our inaugural artist in residence, Morgan Chen's final talk on the project that she developed in our residency. And so again, a brief intro to Morgan. So Morgan is a multidisciplinary artist with a background in journalism, tech, and art. And also she sees herself also prominently as a makeup artist. So really a very multidisciplinary skill set and view towards what the future of makeup could be. And we had a blast having Morgan in our lab this summer for the past 6 weeks. And I also just really want to thank our PhD student, Jin-Wen, over here, who has been, I think the driving force in making this happen on our labs and also working with Morgan. And we also have a couple of our lab members here who I think also really benefited from Morgan's presence. And again, this is a residency that's funded by the National Science Foundation and also a Engage research grant from the College of Human Ecology through the Einhorn Center. And we want to thank our sponsors, and we will be running this artist in residency consecutively for the next 5 years. Yeah, please stay in touch if you may be interested in future opportunities. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to our main event, so to Morgan Chen. So Morgan, here you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. All right. Just make sure that everything's set. Is this working? Yeah, okay. So hi everyone, my name is Morgan Chen. I am the Hybrid Body Lab Artist in Residence for 2022. Some of you may know me, some of you may have been at my previous talk, but for those that may not have heard what I do, I can share a little introduction about myself and my work, and then I'll go into what I've been doing at Hybrid Body Lab for the past 6 weeks in this residency. So to start off and introduce myself, I'm a makeup artist. I'm primarily focused on, or my background is in film makeup. So my visual work has largely revolved around designing for makeup and the body. I specialize in body painting and transformative character makeup, basically taking an actor or model and altering something or emphasizing certain features to change their character. I mostly work out of kit, which means that most of these makeup applications happen on set the day of. And I think a lot of my previous work in character makeup has left me with a pretty good understanding of how to take someone's face and transform them to look very different, even if it's just like traditional 2D makeup, paints, powders, stuff like that. So I'll just briefly share some images from previous film projects. The primary focus of these past works have been on face paint and more regular traditional makeup. As you can see in my makeup, I often adhere things to the face. Actually, in the proposal for this residency, I wrote about how my personal style and technique includes always applying things to skin, rhinestones, pearls, chains, stickers, silicone, even bacterial cellulose are some of the things that I've used before in makeups. And I'm just very interested in like extending the skin by adhering things to it. So using the face and skin as a canvas has always been how I've expressed myself. starting from a very early age. And I find that I communicate ideas or thoughts or patterns that I see through on-skin application. In my last presentation at the start of this residency, I talked about deconstructing material. I defined it as how my work is materially informed, meaning that I find commonality and metaphors within materials in myself. And I use these materials as a tool to build identity or understand my own identity. So that's sort of the basis of what I try to structure my practice around. So even when it comes to like branching out with designing fully digital tech, my work interest usually focuses on the face and body. So how my work has changed after going to a grad program focused on creative tech, I wouldn't really say that I'm more focused on tech itself, but I've been experimenting with shifting my focus towards expression of ideas, readings, and research. I'm still very much a body artist, and my work has always been focused on corporeal elements and images. I'm inspired and informed by the body as a material, and sometimes also like isolating certain elements or subverting them. So this is extended to using materials that are body reminiscent. My last talk, I talked quite a bit about biomaterials and my work with kombucha SCOBY, which I've also experimented with attaching to the face in different ways. I said that I was inspired by the SCOBY because it looks like flesh and it has this organic soft texture. It's like wet and firm. And this interest in the squishy and tensile and flesh-like properties of the SCOBY has like carried over into the project that I've been working on for Hybrid Body Lab. And I definitely see a lot of like kind of parallels with working with this material and my project for Hybrid Body Lab. So here is Social Prosthesis. This is the project that I've been working on during my residency for the past 6 weeks. So the design itself was 3D designed, modeled, and it's comprised of 3D resin printed components, which I first rendered digitally and then I printed. This design, as you can see, like went through many iterations. These are just like some of the screenshots. This was maybe like one of the earlier iterations, and then the one on the right is closer to what it was. I've done work with designing 3D assets for face filters before, but I realized when doing this that printing physically for the human face and designing for it is quite challenging. I think with like the 3D face filters that I've made before, I wasn't really concerned with physics or getting it to stay on the face because it's kind of, you attach it to a face mesh and it kind of floats around following the face tracking. But for a physical object, it's like there's like this fine line between balance and not like overshadowing facial features that I had to sort of come up with solutions for. So in this way, it kind of differs from my earlier 3D printed work because I mostly designed these things to be flat shapes that were easier for a 3D filament printer to print. And I sort of created like curves and shapes by using heat gun to melt plastic. So in this residency, I really sort of challenged myself to think, I'm going to design something for the face, starting with a 3D model and incorporating that into like the printing itself. So here's some of my earlier mask work. But for social prosthesis, the final prototype was completely modeled and 3D resin printed. which allowed it to be extremely thin and detailed with curves and more of an organic structure than sort of my previous work. It was also very fragile. It's my first time using the resin printer, so there were definitely a lot of learning curves with using sort of a new medium. But I found it very inspiring that it could have these very organic sort of curves and shapes. And then I also, through working with the material, I had to take a lot of time to sort of baby it, and I broke many prototypes. So I kind of had to learn how to work with it best. I tried it mostly on myself. The nose piece was the hardest thing to model. And I struggled with it almost like the whole time. I just finally finished it a couple of days ago. So the headpiece is like a more complex shape, but I was able to get it to where I wanted, just like sizing wise after a few tries. But the nose, I didn't realize how sort of a nose structure is like very prominent. And it just took so many different tries. It was hard to model it to sit on the nose properly. At some point, I even almost gave up and I went to the dollar store and bought some sunglasses, and I was going to try to use a sunglass frame to incorporate that. But I just kind of kept trying different sort of ways and kept trying to model it to my face. So the other component to this piece that I'm going to talk about, and perhaps the focal point, is the silicone. So I mentioned this earlier when I was discussing SCOBY, but I'm very interested in the idea of creating soft prosthetics. And there's something really interesting to me about softness as a texture, and how it's very reminiscent of flesh or skin. I've used silicone before in makeup. I've done minor prosthetics, wounds, lacerations, also I've done cheek prosthetics in film work before. And it's definitely a very challenging area to work in. Because a lot of the times these things have to be perfectly sort of blended to the skin in order to make it look believable. So I have worked with silicone before, but I think in something kind of freeing about this project was that I didn't sort of have to limit myself to making it look like that it's melting into the body, but rather maybe in an extension. So when thinking of ideas, I looked at soft robotics and fashion designers that have utilized silicone as their material. And I kind of was marveling over the translucency and the odd organic way that it moves and bends. It's very sort of flesh-like. And like the SCOBY, it invokes something corporeal. In my proposal for this residency, I wrote about dynamic or moving makeup. I said that I was specifically interested in creating motion on the face. And I think that we often see makeup as something static, but as a makeup artist, I've never really seen it as a static form because makeup is constantly shifting, moving, melting. And I think 90% of my work on set has been kind of having to deal with makeup as it moves and falls off the face and people sweat. So there's a lot of, I don't know, I've always seen makeup as something very dynamic instead of something flat. So I've tried to sort of express that and challenge myself to express that in maybe a different way through this project. It's changing throughout time and telling a story, even if unintentional. Makeup holds the imprint of sweat, tears, other general daily wear. And I think dynamism or motion itself opens a new door to creating new gestures and expressions, especially socially in our understanding of makeup and appearances. Will this video work? Okay, so here, oh, it's not positioned correctly. But maybe you can see a little bit. Hybrid Body Lab has previously done work with Shape Memory Alloy, SMA, which Cindy and Jingwen advised me to test and try. How it works is it's a spring wire form, and once heated up, the spring contracts, creating this like movement. So how I first tested it was I attached it to silicone and tried embedding it. And once it like heats up, once running a current through it, it heats up and creates this ruffle, which was a motion that I found really intriguing and organic. And it sort of inspired what became the project. Let's see if I can move this video up. Okay, actually, I'm not gonna mess with it. So I tested all of these pieces on my face first. And it took me a while to figure out how to incorporate this moving silicone into a design in the way that it makes that made sense visually to me. So you can see I tried. Oh. So I tested this first with alligator clips, as you can see here, and I hooked it up to a power supply, sort of to test how it would move. And I tried like many different iterations of attaching it. I tried attaching it directly to the skin. I tried like attaching two silicone pieces together, which is kind of what's happening here. And like I had to like work with some constraints like gravity. But there's like different ways that it sort of twists, and also you can create different patterns based on like how you attach it. So these are some things that I've had to sort of experiment with. Here's some more iterations of like the 3D print. As you can see how I had to change the nose a lot. And I also was, I wanted to use the 3D print as sort of a bone structure. So it took a while to figure out how to make it like not fully like cover the face, and also feature the silicone in a way that didn't like overshadow it. So I tried many different things. And I think also the sort of design challenge, or the challenge of this, was that resin printing takes quite a while. So I was waiting many hours for every sort of different model to come out. And then I would test it, and then I'd be like, oh, I have to change something. So it was definitely a very like time-intensive project as well. Here's some other prototypes. I also sort of experimented with coloring the silicone. So there are like different effects that I tried. I did like gradients. I tried like keeping parts of it clear, and coloring ends, and layering silicone too. As you can see, this whole process is very, very messy. So it was very like something else I had to sort of deal with was how to get like clean edges. And there's also, the silicone picks up like every speck of dust. So that was something that I had to sort of figure out how to work with. But something I really liked about this material too is that it is like translucent. And so I tried to play off the translucency and sort of balance it. I think when you put something on the face, it covers a large portion and obstructs it, but I did want to keep I did want to be able to see the face underneath. So it was important to me to use like a clear silicone and use to keep part of it transparent so that I could still see like facial features underneath. So the final component of this piece is how the movement is triggered. I thought about the interaction that I wanted to happen between the prosthesis and the sort of the context of the work, which I'll go into a little bit later. I think a lot of my thoughts revolve around sociality and how identity is socially constructed, and how we sort of adopt identities in relation to other people. So I wanted this interaction to be social in a way, which is part of the name of the project. To do this, I use Duo Skin, which this is a hybrid body lab picture, is another hybrid body lab technique in which a temporary flash tattoo made from metal leaf is used as a conductive capacitive touch sensor, essentially creating a connection between touch and turning and like using this as a component in a circuit. So this is the final product video, or the final sort of prototype video. The circuit was totally made by Jingwen. I couldn't have done the moving part without her. So let's play it. So as you can see, it's like a small movement, but basically you can like see the springs contract and it moves the silicone. And this was like one of the more final prototypes that I created, but it was very, very difficult to get the silicone to be the right sort of texture, and the placement also sort of created variance within it, which is something I'd actually like to experiment with continuing this project, is like how putting different placements for the SMA, the shape memory alloy, in the silicone can create different effects. So the name I chose for this project comes from Mimi T. Nguyen's 2003 essay, Queer Cyborgs and New Mutants. Mimi uses the term prosthetic sociality. The essay is basically a response to the popular image and myth of Donna Haraway's cyborg from the 1985 essay, A Cyborg Manifesto, which is a foundational text in post-humanist feminism. So among other things, A Cyborg Manifesto talks about the blurring of lines between human and machine, natural and artificial, and presents the aspirational myth of the cyborg. It's something that is untethered to parentage, like earlier myths of characters like Frankenstein. And it's essentially a presentation of the idea that identity is not fixed to a material body. It's a call to not be tied to traditional social hierarchies of gender and politics. And it's like very much a sort of aspirational text to how society could be sort of changed and like reviewing social structure. So in Mimi Nguyen's essay, she responds to this by talking about the Marvel comic character of Karma, who is a Vietnamese cyborg character who has a prosthetic leg. Nguyen's essay argues that we cannot think of cyborgs in the aspirations of Donna Haraway presents alone, but rather that the cyborg figure and the idea of building identity is a privileged position of power. Because even cyborgs with superhuman powers like karma are tied to the socio-political and historical context of their time. She has like a leg that she lost in the Vietnam War. So Nguyen argues that the character of Karma is seen as othered and mutant, not only because of her prosthesis or superpowers, but also because she is a Vietnamese character. In my last presentation, Deconstructing Material, I talked about my design and work intentions and being sort of mindful of the power and privilege that beauty holds, specifically the ability to create beauty or identity through beauty. So Mimi Nguyen writes about the concept of beauty in another essay, In the Right to Be Beautiful, which is sort of a foundational text and something that I looked at when doing research and thinking about my work. She writes that it is an imperative discourse, one that determines what conditions are necessary to live, what forms of life are worth living, and what actions must follow to preserve, secure, or replicate such conditions and forms, and the consequences. So Nguyen's work is very foundational to the thought that I put into my practice, and I try my best to be mindful of the social values that beauty has in our culture. In my work, I try to remember to question and deconstruct things. I often find myself slipping into this pattern of designing or seeking what is most beautiful subjectively. And I don't want to do that without questioning and thinking about why, which is why I sort of draw on essays and readings to inform sort of my practice and the projects that I make. So yes, this is social prosthesis. I just wanted to say thank you to all of these people, specifically Cindy and Jingwen, whose help, without whose help I couldn't have finished this project. And of course, Hybrid Body Lab, all the people that I have met during this residency that I've really enjoyed getting to know, and a lot of other people that have supported me directly or indirectly in many ways. So thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Morgan, for an amazing talk. Very inspiring. And so seeing you day in, day out working in the lab, I think for me, it was super inspiring to hear about, I think, your artistic vision behind this work. And yeah, so thank you so much for preparing such a wonderful and elaborate talk in a very, very short time. And so I think we have some time for questions. And we welcome questions from our online attendees, as well as folks in person. Any questions? Okay, Jingwen. And so speak loudly into the mic.
Hi, Morgan. I think we've talked a lot about all the technical aspects, and now after hearing you talk about your whole process of designing and prototyping, my question is how do you feel of the difference between designing something that's digital and you can see the effect immediately, like what you've done before, versus something that's physical and there's so many unknowns? And what's your biggest takeaway from working with the new materials that we do not have much information provided through other resources, and we have to explore? How do you feel about that? Other lab members here are experiencing the same things. How do you feel about the overall exploring?
Thank you. That is a really good question. So for the first part, how it differs from how my feeling of it differs digitally versus physically. I think as you said, there's with designing something digitally, there's some immediate gratification that comes with maybe making something in 3D and then being able to attach it to an avatar or a face filter and seeing it on a person. And I think this project, it kind of looks like a face filter in real life a little bit because it's like moving. So I think there's, I guess just very basically, like putting the amount of work that it took many, many hours to sort of get it to sit on the face in the way that I had like planned or I wanted it to look, was that itself was like something very rewarding to me, because it took a lot of sort of design iterations, and it feels almost in some way it like almost has more meaning to me because it is a little bit more intentionally designed. It's also a little bit more custom in some ways, because I sort of also designed it to sit on my face because I was the one kind of trying it on after every iteration. So eventually, I guess it's like, here, I totally forgot that it's here. But I guess these pieces were ultimately are kind of designed to fit me. And I think if I were to like create them for somebody else, I would definitely have to change the design. But in this way, it's a little bit, it has like the meaning in that it's like very personal. Whereas I think with like a 3D asset or a face filter, it can be like attached and sort of like sit on anybody's face. So there's definitely something that physicality brings to like an item that is created personally. And then the other part was about materials. Yeah, so I think there was a lot of sort of experimentation that had to go on with these materials, using them for like, I talked about the shape memory alloy, which is the spring that sort of creates the motion. I had to sort of try that many times to sort of get it to where I wanted. And I think I also I didn't have like a background in it or in sort of how it would move. So it was a lot of like documentation. I showed a lot of these like photographs, but I had to take so many videos. And so it would kind of be like I would try it in the lab and then I would go home at night and then rewatch the videos over and over again. It was a little bit like obsessive, but I just really wanted to sort of make sure that I understood what it was doing. And I think that kind of, I talked about this in the first talk, but like the makeup that I do is like self-taught, and it's sort of stuff that I kind of had to learn, lessons that I learned along the way. So I think this very much is also similar in that using materials in the lab, like the silicone, the resin printer, or the SMA, were all kind of something that I had to do with trial and error. So yeah. Thank you for your question. Oh, yes. Oh, okay.
Transfer the mic.
Okay.
I guess I'm just curious, with this whole big process that you've gone through, like what are you going to take from that and apply going forward with whatever process you're on?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, there's definitely so many techniques that I've sort of learned during this process. And I definitely tried to challenge myself to learn a lot of new things. Like now I feel like I know how to 3D model a little bit better and like resin print. So those are definitely skills that I can use in my makeup practice. Like even if it's not in this context, like 3D modeling, especially like in like film and like character design, is like before people would like sculpt using clay and then cast. And those are like very traditional methods that I've also done, but like having this like digital tool kind of saves time. So that's something that I'm like, that I sort of had to learn through this project, and I'll definitely like skills that I'll carry forward. I definitely got to understand silicone better. All of these like pieces that I tried, to make them, you basically have like a 2-part silicone, and there's also time to cure. So this is the same material as making like prosthetics for like a wound or maybe like a fake nose, stuff like that. So this residency also helped me sort of like practice and hone my skills with that. And then in terms of like tech and like more along the lines of like what what Hybrid Body Lab does, I've been like branching more into creative tech and sculptural work. So I definitely want to continue to use things like the shape memory alloy or capacitive touch in future projects. So yeah, there's just a lot of things that are applicable to my practice. And then I also think there'll be more realizations along the way once I leave, and I'll be like, oh, I remember doing this. So yeah, I think it's like kind of all adding to like a memory bank of knowledge.
Well, let's all thank Morgan Chen again for an amazing talk. And thank you so much, Morgan, for gracing us with your presence these past 6 weeks. I think just every lab member, I think, has been influenced by your work, and we also really love learning from you. So thank you so much for also taking a chance on us and spending your time here. Yeah, and thanks to everyone for joining us on our journey and for being here for Morgan's final talk. And also thanks a lot to our Zoom participants. And we hope everyone has a lovely day. Bye.
Thank you all.
Awesome.
The mouse is here. Yeah, it's a little hard. I don't really know what's going on.
I think this is mirroring this, and this is controlled by the mouse.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I will leave.
Yeah. They just locked me out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming.
Thank you for coming.
Please, yeah,
tomorrow?
tomorrow,
Okay.
please come. Thanks so much, Morgan. That was great.
Thank you for coming.
I was gonna tell you that the photos, oh my god, I don't know if you've seen them yet. They're
Oh,
amazing.
really?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's,
I'm
really,
I
like,
can't
you
wait
can
to
use
see
their,
them.
like way back. We were
Thank
worried
you so
about the
much.
lighting in
Oh.
the studio,
Yeah.
but they turned out so good.
Awesome.
Like,
Thank
there's
you.
almost too many to say.
Okay, I can't
But
wait.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
and send you when you guys get a chance.
Oh, yes.
That, yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
will,
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
Photos.
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.